Welcome back to the Dear Katie podcast. This is Katie Koestner. I am the primary host of the Dear Katie podcast, and we are so delighted to have you take this journey with us on our weekly podcast episodes. I just want to remind everyone to do great self-care. Thriving is part of the purpose of this podcast, and we definitely want you to take a break at any time. Warm bath, fresh air, walk a dog, have a bite of chocolate, whatever you need to do good care for yourself. Just as a reintroduction, if you're not familiar with me, I am the woman who was on the cover of Time magazine at age 18 as the first in history to speak out nationally and publicly as the victim of date rape. And HBO made a film about me, and I went on to become the executive director of the Take Back the Night Foundation. We are the oldest, largest global movement on sexual violence in all forms for all people in the world. So we encourage you to visit our website for lots more information. So I'm going to turn it over to our host and our guest for today. Welcome back, everybody, to the Dear Katie podcast. This is Katie Koestner, and I'm delighted to welcome our listeners back. You know that this can be hard to hear, a little bit triggering. We talk about the deep stuff, the survivorship that we've all been through, many of us listening, and how we can help others. Take Back the Night serves as the largest, oldest worldwide movement to end sexual violence. And we have millions who've participated in our events, and we continue to thrive in the footsteps of those who've gone before. And we welcome all of you who unfortunately are now currently needing support. And that's the purpose of the podcast. So today our guests are incredible. We have Jon and Josh. Jon is perhaps the star of the show, but we are so delighted to have Josh with us as well. And I'm going to have each of the gentlemen introduce themselves. Jon, welcome to the Dear Katie podcast. Share with our listeners a little bit about you.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. It's been a long time coming. We met last November, and so many revelations have come since that conference, really for me. I think I'm known more as I played running back at the University of Michigan, and I was one of the loudest, um, I would guess, victims that spoke up about a doctor that was giving unnecessary prostate and testicular cancer screening exams, as well as sexually assaulting thousands of students over the course of 40 years. But I think more importantly, personal revelations that I was able to make and tie so much into my activism is I suffered in silence for almost 50 years of my life. Going back to just a bit about me growing up. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. My mother was a teacher. My dad had a bunch of odd jobs. His last one was a janitor. And my mother taught in the worst neighborhoods in St. Louis. And very often, she was a second grade teacher. Young women that she taught would have to, sell their bodies to feed their families. And it just so happens that my mother would take some of these young ladies and have them babysit me. And then unknowingly, my mother actually introduced me to my first rapist, who was a young lady that witnessed my father, giving me a spanking beating. When he came home one night after, because I was a kid that never slept. I mean, I still don't really sleep. And she used that behavior of my father to, going second grade, probably second to fifth or sixth grade, to have me perform different sexual acts on her and her on me, as well as one of the neighborhood bullies 4 grades above me, going into seventh, eighth grade, cornered me after grooming, kind of harassing me for a good 4 or 5 years into what became rape and traffic through different, kind of secret, sex societies, if you will, of African American businessmen throughout the community up until 3 weeks before high school. And so going into college, I had known what violent rape looked like, but going into college, it never, and during my time in college, I never understood the sexual assault and the digital rape that was happening because of our being forced under the guise of medical treatment of what this doctor was doing. And so, as anyone who gets through their trauma, you know, it's a long road back through the train wrecks of not only that trauma, but how that trauma affects you or how you deal with other traumas. And I remember leaving in November, really just thinking toward the end of the year, what my mission was for my own self healing was to go back until the start of my trauma and really dig through all that had happened. And so um, I looked at it honestly, like your keynote speech was so impactful because you took us down the yellow brick road. Like all of the analogies and anecdotes really led you to the point of your story. And that's how I kind of looked at going back at my life and seeing the different, phases, times, events, traumas, healings, train wrecks, so on and so forth, to get to this point in my life where I realized that who I've been known as, Jon Vaughn, was really the protector, if you will, of the hurt child, Jonathan Vaughn. And so, the first thing I need to do is just thank you for, you know, spurring a perspective of healing that I had not yet journeyed to so that I could actually be here today. It's been a hard process, it's been a dark process, but your story kind of was the fire or the igniter of this burning desire in myself to like finally totally heal and understand what that healing looked like for me. So I just want to thank you with that. And I think more importantly, for this call, what I do know more than anything else in life is how to be an African American man in America and dealing with the taboo nature and the almost shunning of African American men or athletic men that speak up and speak out about their trauma, especially sexual trauma. And hopefully, I can be the light for someone as you were the light for me that day.
Uh, hey, Jon, I just heard all that you shared, and I'm reflective, not so much as my story. You called it the yellow brick road, and I like that way that you described it because the yellow brick road to me is how we get down the path of life. and and it's when we see alongside that road certain things that we might have ignored or not seen in the same way until we've lived more of the path and met the scarecrow and the tin man. Like we needed to meet more people with different frailties or likenesses to ourselves. And and when you said that, I will tell our listeners something else that most of them don't know. It's like you. I had multiple sexual abuses as well. Before everybody saw me as Time magazine cover, like you, and you're like the cat that I think what made us strong, Jon, is this. We both already went through hell. And we not even thought about it very much because we were always thriving and navigating it really successfully. And we could take it all on, and it made you as kick-ass as you are at sports, and you excelled at tons of shit, tons of awesome stuff, you know? And I think the abuses we both suffered when we were young only taught us a skill set of how to navigate life we avoided trauma, more trauma, by being overachievers. And you did, I don't know if that makes sense. Or
It
you can
does.
disagree. You know what I'm thinking? Because like you excel at sports and you dug in and you went there and you suffered the pain. And I avoided more abuse by getting more scholarships and like winning more awards and going to Japan in high school. So I didn't have to be, if I was in Japan, I was thinking, I lived in Japan when I was 17 on a scholarship that only 2 people per state ever got. And the
Mm.
reason, why would a girl want to go to Japan except to escape abuse? I'm not saying like Japan's not cool, but back then I was like, something innate in me was like, you don't want to be touched inappropriately anymore or harmed or hurt or abused. So let's go to a whole, like, another continent so you can avoid it. And I'm like really resonating with everything you're saying because most of our listeners don't know that part of me. They just know Katie was on the cover of Time at 18 for this one incident. But like you, it was lots of stuff. It was tons of stuff, Jon. And
Yeah.
yeah. Mm.
So I have adopted this. I don't know if you've ever seen The Dark Knight, and there's a point in The Dark
Mhm.
Knight where Bane is talking to Batman, and he says, "You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it,
Ooh, that's
and
awesome.
I didn't see the light until I was grown." Like, and I'm paraphrasing, but I remember actually in the theater yelling at that point of the movie because and didn't even know why and have come to realize that because of the darkness that each of us have survived, it allows us to now take our light back into the darkest places on earth because we're not afraid of it anymore
Yeah.
because we were born in it. We had to survive in it and we know what the light looks like. And I try to tell people is that the absent darkness is the absence of light, but there is no darkness in light. So if you can be the light, one of my dearest friends in the world, Trinae Gonzar, whose victim impact statement changed the course of the Larry Nassar trial. Um, we always talk about somehow, some way, be the light because we have to be that lighthouse in the dark. We have to be the port in the storm as advocates because most will not, most most of the world is not trauma informed in their training, in their support. And so sometimes it's just being the light, not having anything to say, not being more than we are, not being, not having the, um, I don't know if you're like me, and I get off to a side. But when I don't feel like doing a podcast or a speech or something, I feel like it's the ones that like I feel like my trauma was preparing me to rip its soul out. Like right now, I'm just excited about the solidarity in my voice because I dread today. I probably played the worst round of golf that I played in
Oh,
5 years.
God, John.
But I've learned that to be the light, you have to turn yourself on in the dark. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'll tell you exactly. Here's me on Friday. I flew to Chicago. I was like, oh my God, what the fuck am I doing? I have to get up and tell the story of the worst night of my life again to all these kids and hope that I'm going to make change. And what am I doing? Why do I keep doing this darn thing? And then you watch, John, and that's like I have to sit in my dark place to come to that stage, to get off the plane, to carve it out, to take the Uber, to get to the hotel, to get my butt out of bed, to do the hellish thing one more time. Because the audience, those kids, 16, 17, and 18, the look on their faces, there's no TikTok, there's no
Yeah,
news, there's nothing that would have affected them the same. And I feel like I'm a I'm a jerk and selfish if I can't take more pain myself when there's no one who can say it exactly that way to resonate. And that
mm,
you're the same, John. Like seriously, like people hear you and the sound of your voice and the way you share your story and you sitting through the darkest and the lightest. We both know it's like horribly taxing on our whole souls, but at the same time, life is short and we lived through already the hopefully the worst of it. We got through all of it, and now we can go on to make sure no one feels the same way we did. I don't know.
absolutely. I am, drawing on my sports background, I come up with these are the mantras that keep me alive.
Mm-hmm.
And, um, when I watched you, and I have this quasi passion, if you will, where I think I have a perspective in photography that most don't, but totally amateur. But what I have this photography like project that I'm working on is titled "From the Survivor's Eyes, Bring the Predator's Demise,"
Oh, brilliant.
and I really I really take notice of the soul that's in the eyes of the survivors that I look like because that life through darkness spells nothing but demise to the predators. And it's almost
Hmm.
like when, a lion never has to tell the hyenas that it's a lion,
Yeah, that's well said.
and not, I feel like in a lot of ways, predators or scavengers, they're like hyenas.
Mm.
And then whether it's male or female, at some point in time, those lions are like, hold on, I'm the lion. You will not prey on me anymore.
Hmm.
And I think there's an obstinance you know, in our stories, but in your story, like you, so interesting. I was talking to Trinae yesterday, where two people from couldn't be more different backgrounds she's like a sister to me. She's a sister I've never had. And
Mm.
like I'm godfather of her youngest, 7-month-old boy. And I was talking to her yesterday about why she needs to come to Georgetown Day School and the summit
Yeah.
because I tell her, I was like, and I was telling her about this podcast and I was telling her about you and the founding of, because we've done Take Back the Night events. And I was telling her, like, Katie found this and like, you just have no idea. Like, but there's another you out here, and for me as a male survivor, the only voice that I knew to be my hero when I needed was a young Caucasian entitled gymnast,
Mm.
right? Um, to be this voice of strength and heroism to allow me to figure out my voice to speak up against the University of Michigan. And the one thing that I tell her all the time is I said, I know there's more of you, right? And it's, I believe that this war that we're in against predators of all kind is growing. And institutions, which Josh will speak to later in their immense, Michigan now is an $18.5 billion
Mm.
endowment.
Whoa.
It's truly a well-funded Goliath, but they're starting to understand that the Davids in our goat herding, sheep herding, five stoned world is coming for them. And we need
Love
to
it.
know that there's not just a David, there are Davids and there are Katies and there are Trinays. And how do we that fight on the front line come together in solidarity to have a voice as loud and a statue or a stature as loud as the Goliaths? Because and I love comics and stuff like that, and it's almost like the Avengers Endgame. Like there is
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
turning point in this war. You're starting to see it with what's happening in entertainment now.
Ooh. Yep.
You're starting to see that the institutions which individuals were preyed upon and were scared to speak up and to speak out are now starting to quiver, starting to run, starting to hide. Like, and so,
But John, let me ask you this. You said we can have a lot of Davids, but the problem to me always with this movement, this cause, is we're all as survivors so frail in the sense that we can't possibly, we're so afraid of trust, intimacy, and it brings an extra layer of trouble to uniting because
yeah,
we're so afraid to trust each other or anybody. I know myself. I lived on the road all my life. I went from one place to another, trusting no one, having, it's just, I'll go on the stage, I'll do this. I know I help people, but I didn't have to trust anyone, nor did I have to sit with them for longer than a night. You know what I mean? Like
right.
I'm all in. Please share. Tell me about it. Let me brainstorm with you. But guess what? I'm on a plane tomorrow and I knew that's all I could do. It was like, I can do that because I adore you. I want to support you, but
To trust you.
I'm afraid of more than that,
Right.
it, and what do you think?
Well, no, I definitely agree. I think that there are levels to this fight. And I
Hmm.
think that there are, you, Trinae, are like the Joan of Arcs. You're on the front line. You're taking the arrows. Like that's a different perspective. Like I can have advocate conversations, and then
Hmm.
I can have frontline special forces advocate conversations.
Right.
right? Like, in what do they call it? We are the black ops, if you will, of the
Right.
fight.
Right.
And I think more than anything else, we have to have faith in the fight
Mm-hmm.
that even if you're fighting in another geographical area, but you know that Trinae's fighting on the front line here and John's fighting on the front line here, and so on and so forth. I think that, well, there's two things. One, trust is about vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you have to be vulnerable to fight.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many, the ironic or the unknown thing about Trinae's and I relationship is I would guess that in the, I guess I've known Trinae since sometime in 2020, early 2021, so 3, 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
that I and her, like, we've shared more tears together than probably a culmination of tears that each of us have shared in this fight outside of each other. And so, and each of us fight a different way. Like, we have a different voice in the fight.
Mm-hmm.
But we've learned to be vulnerable so that I can trust her in the fight and she can trust me in the fight, because at every moment, the fight has to be centered on survivors. Like, because we can't ever change what happened to us.
Mm-hmm. No.
Right. And so you just have that trust that whether Katie's in Chicago, DC, wherever,
Mm-hmm.
that fight is for the survivors, and not because it's easy in today's society to basically promote your martyrdom,
Yeah.
to have it face, have you be the focal point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm really the messenger.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the message.
Yeah,
Because as a
John.
survivor, you still feel that vulnerability and that fragility
Mm-hmm.
of, you know, just because I can get on here for an hour and speak and eloquently, describe what I've gone through. But I'm the guy that says, well, let me just tell you about 3 weeks ago where I told my therapist, because I believe in therapy, which most, you won't hear a lot of African American men speak of.
Mm-hmm.
But I told my therapist that at 54, I realized that I have lived my entire life in a highly functioning depression. That all the things that I have done and accomplished have never been done through happiness and joy. It's always been, I heard this quote the other day, is that when you're surviving, you cannot dream. And I believe that when you dream in black and white, you're dreaming of your reality. When you dream in color, you're dreaming outside of your reality, the things that you want and wish for, and trips and things of that nature. There have been very few times in my life up until I realized what the depth of my trauma was that I dreamed in color, because I've just been surviving.
John, let's talk about that. I feel like I'm in therapy right now too with you. I never thought of it that way, but because like you, my trauma started, like, I think my first thing when I had therapy more recently, I think it was an image of my parents abusing each other. And I must have been 3 when I crawled down like walked like a toddler and saw, a terrible scene. The terrible scene, and I've never told this publicly, but you've inspired me to like talk about stuff like this. Because for our listeners, it makes total sense what you just said, Jon. I've never lived in just a moment of joy. It was always navigating everything else. And the everything else was so dark and so horrible and so grotesque, just grotesque. And then you and I both had to perform the usual tasks, you in St. Louis and me in rural Pennsylvania, and navigate it as if everything was great. And you know, that the scene, my first scene of trauma was my dad handcuffing my mom to a bed, which doesn't sound very good. But and it wasn't fun and games. It wasn't like it was sex play. It was like frightening as heck. And then you think when you're 3 or 4, I now know I'm alone. I trust nothing. And I didn't know that at 3 years old, right? You just, and you too, like when you started thinking since November about all this, the crap, but it's just all of a sudden we realize, and I pose this to you, Jon, like sometimes I think, how is this possible? Like I'm this white woman, you're this black man, and we grew up in totally different towns. We're 5 years apart from each other in age. And how many more people? Is it most of us? I'm like, some days I think, like, is it most of us who grew up with hell? I don't know. It just becomes overwhelming because you meet people who seem completely normal. They're like, and they don't even understand one bit of navigating life at a high level, like both of us. Like they would never suspect that we're navigating it under duress.
Well, yeah. Wow. Like we're sharing a lot, and I
I
love
know.
it
But
because,
I'm telling you, like that's how
uh,
my life started, Jon. Like it's serious now.
yes.
And
No, so what is it
everyone
about
says,
five, right? 3 to 5, right? Because
yeah, 3 to 5.
you
You
know,
mean age 3 to 5, right?
yeah. I
Like
mean,
that's you too. You and I had
yeah.
like same hell
My
or different hell, but
father. Yeah, my father was a collector at one time for the Detroit Black Mafia, and at 5, so my mom being a second grade teacher would send us, my brother and I, to spend time with my dad on Saturdays. He's like, no kids today.
oh God,
I saw my father get a man killed in front of me at 5.
my God,
And
Jon.
so um, and only, well, I'm writing this book. So it's coming out in this book
Are you
because I
gonna write
wanted,
this for real, Jon?
yeah,
You
I mean,
are. This is like the biggest,
it,
craziest. You gotta
yeah.
write. You
So,
should start with. I saw. You should write that. That's the first sentence, the opening line, right? Isn't that your first line?
well, it was like, it's part of what is now the second chapter of my book, but the
Mm,
first chapter really, he started with this 100 days I was at Michigan. But I wanted to give people a perspective of what I had gone through in life to basically Michigan was this out. And I wanted to give this perspective of 18-year-old Jonathan Vaughn, whose mother, um, going into my, there's my childhood and then my, let's call it becoming a man period, and going to
mm,
Michigan and all the things that led up to why Jon Vaughn became such this protector of Jonathan Vaughn.
mm,
And um like I just rewrote I basically in the last couple of days have rewritten the entire book. Well, in some way, shape, or
mm,
form. New chapters and whatnot, because things have come to me a little bit clarity. But I just read you this last sentence that closes out this chapter, and it says, Jon Vaughn could finally start anew. And that was so liberating for an 18-year-old who had suffered extreme abuse. Now, this is the 50 some odd year old man going back and looking at how I felt at 18.
Mm-hmm.
I had done it. I had escaped my rapists and rapers. I had escaped my father, and I had escaped all the horrors of my youth. Finally, at Michigan, I knew I was free
And
to
then
only be subjected
again.
to an environment where I was in constant discomfort and trained to excel in a sport that is organized chaos.
Mm-hmm.
That's what big time sports have been and are, that most people will never get a perspective of. That all that you have dealt with, all that you are, you have to be trained in compartmentalization. And I think highly performing people like yourself, we have mastered the art of compartmentalization.
Oh, yeah.
And so our thriver is really just a survivor.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it is the cloak that we put on to survive and to thrive. Keeps a, like, we think that it keeps us a part of the survivor, of the horrors, of the trauma, because we're out here thriving. But then, which now we tease Josh, right? Because Josh is not 50. When you get 50, you start to realize that, oh,
Yes.
that's just a bunch of bullshit. And all that trauma, the body keeps the score. And if you do not go back and deal with all unresolved trauma, which I didn't learn that until I was well over 50.
But
Well,
but
till I
but
was 50.
let's talk about that for a second. John, I get worried for you and me. And now that we know how deep and wide our trauma is, both of us, like I finally said it also for the first time ever on the podcast because you inspired me. I was like crying when I turned off the camera. I was like, oh my God, if I inspired you as this white blonde girl, woman, if I had that impact on you, I'm seriously humbled because I have buttoned it all up until like literally today. I'm not told, I didn't go back. I knew it was there and I didn't unpack it and I never thought about it. It's too awful and gross and horrible, And I'm like honored that you're unpacking it yourself. But I have I'll start with one question. This is the big one, John. Like I hear as we're talking, you are analyzing and synthesizing how early trauma affected you and how you got to where you are right now, right? You're thinking about like I'm thinking with you, but your ability to be extraordinary about Michigan and come out and be the leader is partly because you were so good and brilliant and already been through hell like me. It enabled you to be an amazing Black man who defied stereotypes and was willing to take the risk and all the punches and all the blame and all the shame. Because you were like, I already, somewhere in my head, I'd already been through that. Like you had not maybe unpacked it until more recently, but innately you were like me. I think when I was willing to be on the cover of Time, it's because I had already been through so much shit. It was like, okay, I'm totally ready to be all alone. I'm ready to stand. I'm ready. Punch me, sign petitions against me, vandalize my apartment, cover my car with honey and baby powder. Parents abandon me. I was like, okay, I'm fine. Because you know what? I already kind of know what hell is. So give me more of it. And the more they gave me, I don't know about you, Jon, but I think I went off topic a little bit, but the more it was painful, the more I was like, give me more. I'll take more pain. Like, give me more pain, hate on me more, and I'll be even stronger. And I don't know what you suffered coming forward with your story, but I can only imagine. Maybe they didn't vandalize your car with honey and baby powder,
Death
but it must have been
threats,
hell. Death threats, right?
slander, all kind of
Slander,
things.
all of it. I'm sure everybody hated on you, and we both took it. Left punch, left, like all of it. Like we were like, give us more. I don't know how you felt, but I was like, give me more. Tell me, I
Yeah,
will take all the blows. Did you ever feel
yeah,
like,
yeah. To my own detriment, in a lot of ways, because on day 66 that I'm out there,
mm-hmm,
sleeping on concrete in front of the president's house, I find
mm-hmm,
out that I have, and mind you, now this is almost a year and a half after I got this book called The Body Keeps the Score,
yeah,
right?
good
But
book.
I find out I have a sweet potato, literally, growing in the left side of my thyroid and a golf ball growing in my right.
Oh my God.
And the doctor, and I hadn't been to the doctor in almost 30 years because you just stop going to the doctor.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
doctor is like, well, we're not even going to biopsy this thing because I've never seen anything this big without it being cancer. And it's
Oh
one of the
crap.
top three doctors, endocrinologists, oncologists in the world at Michigan Medicine. And the crazy thing about that, because I wasn't going to the hospital and I had to be talked in by everybody, and Ted
Mm-hmm,
DeLuca had to bring me in, all that. The
mm-hmm.
crazy thing is they couldn't schedule my surgery till after the 100 days when I finally declared I'm going to be out here at least 100 days was over. And I was like, if I'm going to die,
Mm.
this is where I'm going to die in my last fight. Not the smartest thing to do, not the against everyone's recommendation, right? Oh, you need to get out of there, da 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 da. But when you've been alone and not believed and traumatized and abused and raped and slandered and death threat,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of get this feeling of give me more.
That's what
How you summed it up. All right, well, I mean, I remember saying to Trinae and Kim, which is, Trinae works for Avalon Healing and is the head. I said, well, if they're going to kill me, then they're going to have to kill me right in front of the presidents of the University of Michigan's house because that's where I'm going to be. Because I'm like, if you're going to quit hiding behind and being keyboard warriors and
mm.
teammates that were doing videos and slandering me, I was like, this is where I'm going to be. And I'm not going to be quiet. So if you're coming to get me, here's where I'm at. Like I was fully prepared to die on the sword at that point.
That's
And it sounds
bad.
weird, but
No,
I
it's
think,
not.
my mom marched in civil rights marches. Come to find out that one of my great 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 grandmothers led slaves to the Underground Railroad. And a conversation my mom had with me 30 years earlier was like when she's telling me all this stuff after an episode of Oprah in 1992 that someday you're going to be faced with something that's larger than you and you're going to stand not because it's the right thing to do, but it is because it is in you. Like that's the message my mom gave me 30 years, and now she's passed in 2011, so didn't even know any of these things had happened. But she
Mm.
planted that seed 30 years ago. Um, and as survivors of specifically sexual assault, you and I can't believe that so many people don't believe us. You
It's
know, if I call someone and tell them that my car or my house has been robbed, they believe me right away. If I tell them I've been raped, oh wait, no way that can happen. Oh, the football player or athlete or really, were you drinking? And see, I have daughters, so I understand like what happens and how women are treated, and then they want to put on this moniker of Jane and John Doe, but they leave our oppressors like the University of Michigan and Michigan State and these institutions. They leave their name out there, but we're Jane and John Doe. So they strip of our humanity. And so we're sitting there like, how, what be, it's almost like pre coming out or pre fighting and suffering. Like there's that time when you suffer and you're a part of an organization, you're a part of the community where you're a valuable part of the community. But when you come out and speak against the suffering and against the oppression, you're now ostracized from the history of that institution or community. That blew my mind. I couldn't understand how there was so much hate in just telling the truth.
John, let's talk about that. Like here's some narratives that I got. I'm on the cover of Time, and the students have signed 2,000 out of 5,000 a petition to send to HBO to say, don't make the movie, Katie's a liar. I've met none of them, right? So I know this is circulating, and this is old school. There's no social media on it, but everyone hates me. I'm even voted the most dangerous man on campus. And my only recourse, John, you'll love it. I went into the student union where the voting was going on, and I stood there with my arms crossed, all by my lonesome, next to a payphone. And I said, I will be the most dangerous, but you're going to have to change that to person because I'm not a man. If I need to, it's like, I love how hard we both fight. I was not outside the White House, but I think that's something so interesting about the things you're saying. Both of us fought so hard and so intensely against institutions and belief systems that would stereotype. And so I was headed to this question. We haven't really talked about it, but you alluded to you said a football player, how could he be raped? And then you said drinking or this, like a lot of times people are mystified about how men can experience sexual violence. I'm like, it happens all the time. And why are you so binary that you can't think about how, a penis is a penis and it does work in lots of circumstances, even against one's own will, right? And I don't know. Yeah. And most people are like befuddled that can happen. And they're befuddled about how, you led somebody on or you didn't resist or you didn't protest. What if, I constantly got this. I would have fought to the death not to be raped. I'm like, well, you weren't in my shoes. And when you start out being abused when you're really young, you start to think maybe trying to stop it when you're 5 or 7, you realize you can't fend off those perpetrators. I don't know. I had either toward maybe we should talk about you and being this very powerful, strong male victim and what that means to you, and extra layers of difficulty being Black. But I'm open to whatever you want to talk about. We've talked about a lot, but what do you want to talk about?
Let me just answer what you just talked about, specifically. I had to understand all the clinical definitions of rape when I found out about what happened at Michigan and Dr. Robert Anderson, because I didn't realize that you could be digitally raped with fingers and objects and things. I thought that was just sexual assault.
Right.
And so when you are trying to become a Michigan man or trying to become a college athlete, and you're the first in your family, or there's all these pressures, and
Mm-hmm.
the doctor says I need to do a prostate cancer screening exam, which at 18 I didn't even know what a prostate was, or a testicular cancer screening exam, and
Mm-hmm.
he was the gatekeeper to your practicing. As an 18-year-old, you're just doing what you're told to do.
Mm-hmm.
You don't realize that this man is doing this to thousands because there was never anyone in the exam room but us. You see what I'm saying? So, like,
Mm-hmm.
I answer that question so quick when people are like, well, how could a guy get raped? I was like, did you know what a prostate was when you're 18? No.
Nice.
If a doctor said, and it's all the hate comes from people who love Michigan. So I was like, if a doctor said, and you actually had the opportunity to have a scholarship to play for Bo Schembecker at the University of Michigan, told you he needed to do a prostate exam for you to play, which you would not. Yes, absolutely. I can't believe anybody that would say no.
Right.
One of the greatest offensive players in the history of Michigan said it like this. Dr. Robert Anderson was like the person who got a box of chocolate for the first time. He's going to try them all to see which ones he likes. So we all had it happen to us at least once in his tenure.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, that's my rebuttal to that. I think
Yeah.
what I will say, to go on to the next topic, I think no man, no woman wants to carry the scarlet letter of a rape victim.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm sure there are days that you would not like to be a rape victim, and with so many people to know, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's not what you know, no one wants that scarlet letter. You don't aspire to be a rape survivor. I think as I think what changed for me in my advocacy is I told this story. I've actually I've never told this story publicly, but one who has survived being sexually trafficked and forced to do unspeakable things by gunpoint or the threat of killing my mother, to this men that were much older than me, grown, and having to sit in a room as Jon Vaughn, the NFL player, at a black tie event or at a charity tournament, and see because you never forget the face of someone that's raped you, and
Mm-hmm.
to see these men and celebrate me and want to introduce me to their business partners or their attorneys in their firms or their wives, and they had no recollection of 10 or 12 years earlier that they were my rapists. And I had to be the one to be calm, be professional, be cool, not make a scene, to hide that instant trauma when when someone turns around and you see that face at a golf tournament or at a
Mm-hmm.
black tie event. And staying quiet during that. Now, some 30 years later, I said, you know what? I'm no longer going to be quiet. I'm, you know, not to, well, sometimes cursing is one that I don't give a fuck attitude. Or there's nothing that you can say to me, do to me, and I don't really care. I've been called more horrific sexual names, degrading because of what I've had to suffer through and spoke out about. And I don't really care. Like, I don't care what you think of me. I don't care how you feel. If I see injustice, I'm going to speak up on injustice. And the 50-year-old John would not be quiet in the face of a man who raped me under secrecy as a child, to now want my autograph and to introduce me to his counterparts as if he's the cool guy because, hey, I know Jon Vaughn. I want to introduce you to Jon Vaughn or whatever. Like that, if there's one regret I have as a survivor is that I fight with, which is not really a regret. It's a shame.
Mm-hmm.
Why can I speak up now when I couldn't speak up then? But I think that's also how your detractors want you to feel. They want you to feel that shame to keep you quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get over that really quick and realize that I was still processing my trauma. And what I know today, looking back on the train wrecks of my life, it's also why I speak up, because I think it's even more taboo and more swept under the rug and more dealt with in house in the African American or men of color community
Mm-hmm.
all across the globe. And so literally, I almost died sleeping out there on the street, and all the stress in surgery, blood pressure went up to 250 over 150, and I
Oh
was
my
the
God.
highest stroke victim, and I never had high blood pressure. You get to a point where you're like, the battle didn't kill me. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
here for a reason. And I know what it's like to suffer in silence for so long that it pains me to know that there are so many still suffering in silence. So I say this in golf: one shot, one hole, one voice, one life.
Mm-hmm.
If someone hears one of our voices and we can save one life, then all our pain and trauma has been worth it. That's just how I live my life. A lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people don't adhere to that. Um, but they also didn't suffer through, you know, 100
Um,
rapes by the time they were 21.
right. Yeah. Oh my gosh, Jon. I don't know that we should keep going. This is a lot for our listeners to process.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think we've overloaded them and ourselves, but I kind of land on we didn't hear from Josh. Do you want to introduce Josh for a second? Since you how
Yeah.
did you two meet? How did you
We
two
met.
meet?
Josh is the president of a nonprofit called PAVE, promoting awareness, victim empowerment. And I was introduced to Angela Rose, who is the founder and executive director of PAVE. And then as I got involved in that organization, I met Josh, who ironically works at the University of Michigan in the medical department on the business side of the University of Michigan. And knowing his background, Josh is probably one of the most intelligent, smartest, kind-hearted people that I've ever met in my life. Who doesn't have a lot of words, but the words that he says is so meaningful, and the stance that he takes as a non-survivor of sexual assault, but as an individual who stands up for us. He's like he's like the guy that, I was watching this medieval stuff the other day, and this tribe is going to war, right? And they're passing through a village. And Josh is the guy who's like, hold on, let me get my spear, and I'm coming with you because we're going to fight the people that are the oppressors, right? Like, that's Josh, and willing to speak up publicly about what has happened at Michigan and these other institutions, to the point where, he has people within institutions, but individuals of power within institutions all around the world starting to talk about this. That is Josh.
Well, that was a amazing
Wow.
intro. And as we kind of head toward the end, Josh, tell us a little bit more about your commitment to this cause and why. like maybe you'll inspire other people listening to get involved.
Sure. First, I want to thank you, John, for that intro. That's got to be one of the kindest intros I've ever received, and I hope I can live up to it. Katie and John, both of you, I feel so humbled to be around either of you. One is your achievements in life that have nothing to do with being are just extraordinary. I mean, both of you have achieved so much, and second is then as survivors, as repeat survivors of what you've been through, the courage, the strength, the insight, the intelligence, the resilience, the work ethic, the perseverance, and mostly the kindness and compassion you've shown, and how that has touched lives and probably so many lives that you have no idea you've made an impact on. And I'm humbled to be around people like the two of you. As John said, I'm ironically, I volunteer with this organization called PAVE, which promoting awareness of victim empowerment, founded by Angela Rose, which John mentioned. I volunteered there for 19 years because I met Angela, who also is a survivor as a teenager, who's been through some of the type of things that both of you have been through, and it just is so extraordinary. And I said, if you can help someone like that, you've done a good thing in the world. I'll say the same about both of you. If you can help someone like either of you, you've done a good thing. So I volunteered with PAVE for 19 years. I've been president of the board for the past 6.5, give or take. And then in real life, I'm an executive director of a foundation called the philanthropic foundation called the Joseph H. Cantor Family Foundation. And Joe passed away a couple of years ago at age 97, but he fought in World War II, and just as someone who was a mentor to me, embodied moral courage, which is the single most important thing both of you have and so many others have that we need to make this work, is moral courage. And then in real life, I am a professor at the University of Michigan Medical School. I helped build this department called the Department of Learning Health Sciences. That's all about learning from experience. And yet, on this front and on so many other fronts where things have gone wrong, I find Michigan and so many other institutions, they put up every barrier to learning they can. We actually have a set of principles that we've created about how to learn. It's like they violate every one of them: transparency, scientific integrity, multi-stakeholder, cooperative leadership, bringing in everyone with a voice. No, Michigan and so many other places silence voices, create metrics that make it impossible to learn, and on and on. And it's like they want to perpetuate the same old thing, which caused, again, what John lived through might have been the largest, I don't even have the word for it, but the largest mass sexual assault by a single predator in U.S. history happened on that campus. And it's happened on so many other campuses. And actually, all these schools have come together to help each other, sort of. When Ohio State was accused, Michigan and Michigan State and Eastern Michigan, I'm sorry if I'm misstating, but quite a number of schools joined on Ohio State to help them kind of push back against the survivors being able to even explain what happened to them. And I think that's terrible. John, you're my hero. You're just a nonstop inspiration. I know John is fond of the line that God doesn't call on the equipped, she equips the called. But John, man, have you risen to this challenge? And a guy who's never been camping before went out camping wrong time of year to start, but camped out all winter in Michigan to take a stand about this, and that's just inspiring. But I guess my message is sort of, one is anyone going through this could use an ally and could use a friend. And if just even reaching out and trying to be a friend to someone and a supporter to them, even if you're like me, lucky enough to have never been through anything like what you've been through, and I can't imagine it, just to reach out and be a friend to someone is one important thing. Second, you hear it all the time on the subway, on whatever, there's airports. If you see something, say something. If you know something's wrong, someone should say something. Someone should do something. Well, guess what? I am somebody. So are both of you, and so is everyone listening to this podcast and everybody else. Mm-hmm. So you can do something, and then third is you probably have something you're really good at or know how to do. So I played a role along with lots of other really smart, talented people in creating this department at Michigan, this sort of new field. And I think there's something we can do in academia around, because there's something special about universities where this is happening. I mean, this horrible stuff happens everywhere, and you both have other stories from your own life, but there's something about the dynamics in universities where something really awful is happening at them. And I want to do something about that piece of it, and I'm trying to push to create or build upon things in academia to get, as John said, getting people to do this stuff, talking about it, and then doing something about it. And I think that's something I've done a little bit before, and I'm trying to use what I know to do it again. And I also am a lawyer with a background in policy and public health and business. And I watch how the money, especially the grants from the federal government, allow these perpetrators to continue. Because if you can bring in these grants, it trumps alumni donations, it trumps other things. If you can bring in these big federal grants, you walk on water at Michigan and at so many of these other schools. And so I just happen to use my experience in DC, again, taking what I've done, use my experience in DC and helped folks like Jon and many other survivors from other schools get in front of people in Congress and talk about what they've been through, with one possibility being, how can you change how the federal government gives grants to all these universities to sort of cut off the money. And actually, I want to tell one Michigan football story that doesn't involve Jon and doesn't involve the roast of Tom Brady and doesn't and doesn't involve Jim Harbaugh, but it's something that inspired me. Was I read the first time I helped Jon and others get in front of Congress, but the first time I got to speak to Congress myself was, of all things, in the Gerald Ford building. I was in the Gerald Ford Congressional Office building, and Gerald Ford was an alumni of Michigan, and I read a little bit of a story and I looked a little more into it. But when he was an alumni and he played football for them. And when he was playing football, he saw another injustice, which was the school was willing to, they had black players, but if they played against a racist, usually at that point, at that 1930s Southern school that that was really racist, they would bench their black players. And apparently, this is 1930s, obviously, this is a long time, but so Gerald Ford supposedly, this was a story that was supposedly told at his funeral, that he said this was wrong, and he was a good player, and he refused to play in a big game where they were playing against a Southern school. Yep. And, I guess my point in that is, I don't have anywhere near the kind of courage either of you have, but it does take courage. It does take courage for me or for anyone else to say something. If you're an employee of an institution, if you're a student at an institution, if you're a volunteer, it takes courage to say something when you see something wrong. But this, by saying something, one is he made a difference for that cause. But it's also really important that someone from the institution do it. Because when Michigan is telling its story later, the fact that someone inside of Michigan did it, someone they selected to be a student, someone from Michigan, who happened to go on to be president, but the fact that someone from Michigan did it is really important to Michigan's story. And I'll say that about any institution. If you speak up, even if you feel all alone, and there are times I've challenged things where I felt alone, if you speak up when you see something wrong, that's, in the long run, that is better for the story of your institution as well. And just don't be afraid, and you do have allies, but there's this tendency, to make everyone feel alone. I know Jon talked about feeling alone, Katie, you're talking about feeling alone. There's a tendency to isolate people. But, it's them, as Jon said, it's him in the doctor's office and nobody else. He doesn't know what's happening to anybody else. He feels alone. The system seems structured to do that, and I think if you see something wrong, there's probably other people seeing it. Say something, do something in whatever way you can, and that is really important. And just be a friend to people. People need some kindness and love and caring and support. And standing behind someone like you and Jon is just a privilege of a lifetime.
We wish there were, you manifest that good thought to everybody you can imagine. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank both of you. My God.
Yeah, for sure.
Two of you are amazing. I just don't have the words, but the two of you are amazing.
I think I speak for myself, and I bet for Jon, it's like the end of a day. If we help some more people, it was a good day. Even if it was a bad golf day,
right?
It was, some part of it was a good day, and then we keep doing it again tomorrow. And that's how I live, and I'm sensing that's you too, Jon.
Absolutely. What a scar tissue breaking moment. Like, I just feel so alive.
Me too.
And in the light, so it was a great honor. Like I said, at the end of last year, man, I was tired. I was really tired. And I just remember every word in your story. It, you helped me turn around and go back through the minefield. Like, and that I didn't, and then the minefield where I didn't know where the mines were.
I know,
And
John. I'm
I'm
sorry.
just so
I'm
grateful.
I'm
No,
I'm sorry. Like I hear you.
it's like a
You're
beautiful pain.
Yeah. John,
It's
that,
a
that
beautiful pain.
that was one of the times you told me, you said, my reality is becoming bigger than my dreams. I know you talked about dreaming in black
Yes.
and white, dreaming in color before. That was one of the times around that time you told me your reality is becoming bigger than your dreams. And Katie, I think you played a role in that for just doing what you do and saying what you say and sharing of yourself and,
Yeah.
and being who you are.
Yeah. I
well,
mean, you have, I'll end with this: God never calls the equipped; He equips the called.
and then likewise, John, I'm going to write something. If you want me to open your book, close your book, let me write something in there. Because you know what? Today, this interview also made me feel a little renewed and not so
Mm,
alone. Because honest to God, I feel like the two of us are so similar. And it sounds crazy to look at the two of us like
right.
on the screen. Like, how could we be so alike? But I feel like, my God, we get each other in a really beautiful, poignant, powerful way. And we both navigated our choices, and we come to the same conclusion. And I think it's because the level and narrative of our trauma is immense, and the level of our achievement is equally immense. And we must have some wiring someday.
Right.
The neurobiologists are going to be like, oh, that's what makes them both tick. And
Right.
it's
Mm.
so glorious. Like, you also inspired me today. So I had no idea until today how I affected you back months ago, but you affected me similarly today, and I don't think I've met anybody like you.
I
I meet a
appreciate that.
zillion people, right? But I really resonated with you personally, so I'm honored, truly.
Same here. It's been great,
All
and I
right.
just hope that your listeners enjoy.
I think they can't help but be beside themselves at the end of this, and hopefully they're bawling and going out there, and they're either going to be you, me, or Josh. They have three
Yes.
options, and
Yes.
all are beautiful ones, all are beautiful options. So please do, to conclude, our listeners, please continue to heal, continue to thrive, continue to more than survive, continue
Mm.
to go on and find one more scrape of yourself that will help others, because you have it in you. You just have to dig deep and find it. Um, and all of us have amazing gifts, and we've all been through lots, and yet we can keep going. So don't forget the legal hotline. If you are a survivor and have not sought justice, you can call the legal support hotline. Please fill out the form on the website for Take Back the Night to share your story. We welcome you to listen to our global virtual. If nothing else, you can buy some swag and wear your brand of survivorship on your shirt, or your hat, or whatever makes you happy. But this is hopefully one more step in your collective healing process. So thanks for our listeners for tuning in, and keep going. And again, John and Josh, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you again, everybody, for joining another episode of the Dear Katie podcast. I hope very much you found today's episode helpful, empowering, and a way to take another step in that long journey toward healing and supporting those we care about, learning about sexual violence prevention, and also survivor support. For those of you who don't know, again, the Take Back the Night website has tons of great resources, books, self-care options, cool merch. If you're feeling like you need a wearable, we have great t-shirts. Of course, we would love it if you follow along on our free newsletter with news and events going on around the country and even around the globe. And finally, don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. You'll find our entire community popping up here and there, and recaps of our podcast episodes as well. So together we shatter the silence, and together we end the violence. Take care.